Hello and thanks for joining us for our mid-morning edition of Arirang News. I'm Mark Broom. Let's start by taking a look at the day's headlines. Stay safe. A typhoon is ticking towards South Korea, set to pass close to Jeju Island this evening. Typhoon Soulik is packing strong winds and heavy rain. The whole of the country will be feeling its effects from Thursday. A final farewell. The 89 South Koreans meeting long-lost family members at the reunion event have a few more precious hours to hug, talk and exchange presents with their relatives in the north before heading home this afternoon. Plus, the employment situation in South Korea for young people remains terribly bleak. Latest figures show the number of jobless young Koreans reached a 19-year high in July. In other words, the highest since the tail end of the Asian financial crisis. We start with the weather-related news this morning as a massive storm, Typhoon Soulik, is edging ever closer to the southern part of the Korean peninsula. Now, generally, these typhoons indirectly affect us here in Korea, but this one is on course for a direct impact. The last time that happened was 6 years ago, and it caused a fair bit of damage. Therefore, take the necessary precautions because it might be quite dangerous out there over the next few days. For more on this, we're going to talk to our Lee Ji-hyun at the Weather Centre a little earlier than we normally do. Ji-hyun, this is looking really like it's going to be a big one.
Good morning, Mark. And yes, you are right. We can already see Typhoon Soulik getting close to the Korean peninsula. The typhoon is on course for Seogwipo and Jeju Island, and it will sweep across the Korean peninsula through Friday. And Soulik will go just to the west of Gwangju tomorrow afternoon and continue to travel in a northeast direction. The storm will hit the capital area directly by early Friday morning. So the worst of the wind and downpours are expected in Jeju Island and the western regions. So a typhoon advisory has been expanded to waters of Korea's southern coast and remains in place for waters of Jeju Island. Strong winds and high waves are expected as well. The nation should brace for torrential showers as well. Again, Jeju and the western regions will see heavier showers. In fact, the southwest and Jeju Island could see up to 400 millimeters of heavy showers. And we will feel the hot and moist air sweeping the country due to the typhoon today, with highs ranging from 30 to 35 degrees Celsius. That's all for me at this hour. Back to you, Mark, in the studio.
Well, thank you, as always, to our Ji-hyun for the weather update there. Now we're going to stay with this typhoon that's getting closer and closer to us here in South Korea. In particular, worry, of course, is Jeju Island at the moment. But on its current path, it is forecast to be the first typhoon to cross directly over the country in several years. The last time a similar storm, Typhoon Kompasu, did that back in 2010. In fact, 5 people lost their lives and there was widespread damage to property and farmland as well. So do stay safe. Keep stressing that, but it's very important when this storm makes landfall. So Eun-kyung has the details.
Korea is expected to be hit directly by typhoon for the first time in 6 years starting Wednesday. The last typhoon that made landfall on the Korean peninsula was Sanba in 2012. The 19th typhoon of the season, Soulik, is heading northwards after it was formed in waters northwest off Guam's coast last week. Although Soulik has been categorized to the equivalent to a Category 2 hurricane, it stands out from previous tropical storms as it features an enormous eye. A typical cyclone eye is around a few dozen kilometers wide. However, Typhoon Soulik's eye is more than 100 kilometers wide, indicating that it would take several days for the Korean peninsula to get out of the direct influence of the storm.
Typhoons usually can't pass over Korea when the North Pacific anticyclone surrounds the peninsula. Korea has been free from typhoons directly influencing the nation because the North Pacific anticyclone has been rotating over the peninsula.
Korean authorities are on high alert and are bracing for potential damage. Typhoon Soulik is forecast to be similar to Kampasu in 2010, which claimed 5 lives and caused widespread damage in Seoul as well as mountainous and coastal areas. The rare typhoon has been sweeping in towards southern Japan and is now heading north nearing Korea's Jeju Island. Soulik is forecast to hit the city of Gwangju on Thursday afternoon and move towards Gangwon-do province by Friday afternoon, bringing heavy rainfall and strong wind gusts. 서은경, Arirang News.
Now, more smiles mixed with tears and heartbreak today because it's the third and final day of the first round of reunions for Korean families who've been torn apart due to more than 6 decades of war and division on the Korean peninsula. They first met on Monday, and the time to say goodbye once again and almost certainly forever is looming now. Let's go live to our Oh Jung-hee, who's been covering this story for us from Sokcho there. Jung-hee, it's a really sad day for all the families as they have to go through what is a second mentally devastating separation. But what do we expect to see today?
Mark, I'm actually standing by at the Inter-Korean Transit Office located in Gosong. This will be where the South Korean families will be coming back today in the late afternoon. Well, as you've mentioned, today's the last day of the 3-day-long family reunions, and we're hearing from South Korea's joint press pool there at North Korea's Mount Kumgang that families are feeling sad about having to part again after such a short time together. This morning, the South Korean families ate breakfast by themselves and took a short morning walk, and they packed their bags ahead of their departure in the early afternoon. So starting from 10 a.m., South and North Korean participants will be meeting each other for 3 hours, which will be their last session together. The originally plan was that the families would have 2 hours only, but upon South Korea's request, it was decided yesterday that they'll be given 3 hours for today's session. That raises the number of total meeting hours from 11 to 12. The participants told the pool reporters this morning that they feel quite melancholy and sentimental as their reunions got to the final day. Recalling their get-togethers over the past couple of days, they added they just could know that the North Korean participants were indeed their relatives and could recognize the faces they saw when young, despite all the wrinkles. The current session will most likely be their one last get-together in their lives, and the family said they would just like to tell their relatives, take care. Mark, we're already into the final session of the 3-day-long family reunions. The time went by so quickly, and it'll be the families there will be feeling more like that, even more than we do. After the morning session today, the South and North Korean families will be saying a heartbreaking final goodbye to each other as the South Koreans head back home in the early afternoon. Mark.
Well, thank you very much to our Jung-hee there. She was reporting from Gosong rather than Sokcho, as I mentioned mistakenly before there. Now, we're going to stay with the reunions. As Jung-hee touched upon there, emotions were running high, but it was a touch calmer on Tuesday compared to the first day. A private setting not provided in previous gatherings was a deeply appreciated change by the participants, where they could speak more openly and candidly with each other. Cha Seung-mi turns the spotlight to the personal stories of the people at the reunions.
The separated families got to have some real family time in private on Tuesday for about 3 hours. They were set up in private rooms where they exchanged gifts they brought for each other and had lunch together. No media were allowed into the rooms, making things more peaceful and intimate. And participants seemed to love it.
아무래도 개별로 만난 게 자유가 있고 서로 마음을 털어놓고 얘기할 수 있으니까는 개별 만나는 게 몇 배 낫지요.
But some still expressed regrets.
시간이 금방 가던데 그때 시간은 2시간인가 되는데도 한 30분 정도밖에 되는 것밖에 안 되는데.
Kim said the time felt especially short as he and his sister sat together crying, recalling their mother who had passed away, suffering from the guilt of leaving her 2 baby daughters in the north. As for the gifts the families gave each other, from the south they brought a lot of daily necessities, ranging from vitamins to winter parkas. But it wasn't just South Koreans who showed such concern. The North Koreans also brought a lot of nutritional items like ginseng. And of course, for this festive event, there was alcohol. Some brought rare liquors from Pyongyang and Mount Baekdu, and some brought colorful tablecloths so they could remember the reunion at every meal.
나중에 그러면 식탁에다가 이렇게 딱 해서 쓰실 생각이세요?
그렇죠. 써야죠. 주는 거를 안 쓰면 안 돼요.
And during their group reunion in the evening, it seemed like they didn't want to waste a single second they had together. During today's meetings, they seemed a lot more at ease and more smiles were seen, jokes and stories were told. Some sweet moments were spotted by the press poll. To Kim, she's still like a baby sister even though she's over 80 years old now.
그래도 이제 또 뭐 못다한 얘기도 더 이제 나눌 수가 있고 또 이렇게 생각하면 또 새록새록 이제 생각이 나잖아요. 뭐 73년 동안을 못다한 얘기들이 많으니까 못다.
They talked for a while today, but they said they don't mind repeating the same stories again and again. 차상미, 아리랑 뉴스.
Well, just a reminder that you should stick with Arirang TV for all the latest on those reunions. Arirang TV really does provide the most comprehensive coverage you'll find in English, so you can get a sense of the importance of these reunions. And we must remember as well that this is the first round of reunions. We still have the second round to go as well, so this is going to be stretching well into this week. Now, in other news, the United States has added to its growing list of sanctions against entities that violate UN restrictions regarding North Korea, this time hitting 2 Russia-based companies and 6 vessels with punitive measures. The US Treasury Department said it will continue to pressure Pyongyang until the regime achieves final and fully verifiable denuclearization. Our Kim Hyo-sun tells us more.
The Trump administration has imposed new sanctions against 2 Russian shipping companies and 6 vessels for violating the UN Security Council resolutions. The U.S. Treasury Department announced Tuesday that the Vladivostok-based companies transported petroleum products to North Korean vessels in violation of international sanctions. It confirmed that Russian flagged ship transported over 3,500 tons of oil to North Korean vessels earlier this year. The Treasury also explained that the buyer was North Korea's Taesung Bank, which has already been slapped with sanctions by Washington for engaging in illicit economic activities for the regime. Explaining that the sanctions will remain in place until Pyongyang achieves final, fully verifiable denuclearization, U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin stressed that those who violate the UN restrictions on North Korea will be sanctioned under U.S. law. This is third round of North Korea-related sanctions imposed by the Trump administration just this month and can be interpreted as added pressure against the regime ahead of U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's scheduled 4th visit to Pyongyang soon. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
Well, that title there lets you know that now is time where we give you the latest from Jakarta and Palembang, the host cities for the 2018 Asian Games. And South Korean athletes added 3 more golds to the country's medal tally on day 3 of the Games. Now, South Korea remains 3rd in the medal standings behind its 2 biggest regional and sporting rivals, China and Japan. Our Won Jung-hwan reports.
Just like day 2 of the Games, South Korea added 3 more golds to their medal haul on day 3, 1 each in taekwondo, fencing, and wrestling. Greco-Roman wrestler Ryu An-soo defended his Asian Games title on Tuesday, winning a gold in the men's 67-kilogram event in Jakarta. Ryu beat his Kazakh opponent by a point in the final to seal his 2nd Asian victory, following his podium-topping performance in Incheon 4 years ago. Speaking to reporters after his victory, the 30-year-old said his next target is grabbing gold at the upcoming Tokyo 2020 Olympics. South Korea's taekwondo and fencing squads continue to do the country proud on Tuesday. Taekwondo fighter Lee Da-bin won the gold medal in the women's over 67-kilogram gyorugi competition. Lee defeated Denis Kanzel of Kazakhstan 27-21 in the final, making her a two-time Asia champion. Lee won gold in the women's 62-kilogram category in 2014, but decided to compete in a heavier weight class this year. Fencer Kang Young-mi captured gold in the women's individual épée on Tuesday, giving the country its third gold medal in the sport. Kang, the world number 6, defeated the 5th-ranked Sun Yiwen of China in the final to win her first Asian Games gold medal. Kang becomes the first South Korean champion in the women's individual épée since Park Se-ra in 2006. Elsewhere on day 3, South Korea picked up 2 more medals in the pool, as rising stars Kim So-young and An Se-hyun won silver and bronze respectively. Kim finished second in the women's 400-meter individual medley, while An finished third in the women's 100-meter butterfly. South Korea, despite missing its biggest swimming star Park Tae-hwan, has already won 4 medals in the sport after just 3 days. South Korea, which is aiming for 65 golds, has captured 8 gold, 12 silver, and 14 bronze medals so far, to rank 3rd overall in the medal standings behind China and Japan. 원정환, 아리랑 뉴스.
Now, we wish it wasn't the case, but South Korea is enduring one of the worst unemployment crises in the country's history. Latest figures show the problem is especially grim for Koreans in their late 20s and early 30s. According to Statistics Korea, the jobless rate for Koreans aged between 25 and 34 stood at 6.4% last month. For the month of July, that's the highest on record since 1999. Back then, South Korea was struggling to get back on its feet in the wake of the 1997 Asian financial crisis. The report added the number of unemployed Koreans aged between 25 and 34 marked 338,000 in July, up 11,000 from the same period last year. The government cites structural problems in its labour and education sectors as the reason behind the worsening job figures for young Koreans. The South Korean government is extending a helping hand to small business owners and the self-employed to ease the burden of the minimum wage hike. At a policy coordination meeting on Wednesday, the ruling Democratic Party of Korea and the government agreed it will come in the form of additional financial support. The two sides say they will expand the number of people eligible for earned income tax credit, a program that gives tax refunds to low-income households. The package also includes supporting social insurance fees and a cut in credit card commissions for small online business owners and private taxi drivers. They also plan to provide special low-rate loans to small business owners, while small businesses with fewer than 5 workers will get an additional monthly job allowance. The government expects that the measures will be equivalent to providing over $6 billion in support. The ruling party also vowed to pass related bills during the August parliamentary session so the new measures can be implemented smoothly. And small business owners in South Korea have been crying out for government help to see them through this crisis that's been triggered by what was a hefty minimum wage hike. Hong Yoo went to meet with some of those expected to benefit from the upcoming changes.
Empty seats rows after rows. Silence overwhelms the PC cafe, and only the sound of the owner cleaning can be heard. The owner, who used to have employees to take care of the shop, is now working alone, all by himself from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. The cafe is no longer open 24 hours because the owner cannot afford to pay his employees, reflecting on the minimum wage increase for this year and next year, which rose 16.4% and 10.9% respectively.
The decision to increase the minimum wage was just like telling us, you now must pay them this much. No questions allowed. So for us, it's hard to keep our business going when the expenditure to maintain our business running keeps increasing.
It's a similar story for this restaurant as well. Only one table is occupied by customers and the rest remain empty during lunch hour when it should normally be busy. In response, the National Tax Service unveiled a set of measures last week, including the postponing or scrapping tax audits for small business owners until the end of 2019. But it may come short when making a difference in helping the self-employed, estimated to make up 21% of Korea's working population.
It is hard to understand why they came up with such measures, because these days everyone uses credit cards to pay. So our income already being accessible, exempting us from tax investigation is not helpful at all.
A local experts say such measures fall short in terms of providing a primary solution and call for mid to long-term measures tailored to the needs of different regions and sectors, as well as measures that could lessen the burden of small business owners piling on debt.
One of those ways could include expanding financial support for small businesses so that they could readily secure finances when they apply for small private loans.
A report by the Korea Institute of Finance released earlier this week showed the country's self-employed people are 3 times more likely compared to salaried workers to be suffering from repaying heavy debt. Hong Yu, Arirang News.
Now, the United States and China are set to revive trade negotiations that ended unsuccessfully in June with a meeting in Washington on Wednesday local time. That'll be Thursday here in Korea. However, neither side is optimistic of making that much progress. Lee-Seung Jae with the details.
The world's 2 biggest economic powerhouses are set to take another stab at easing their trade tensions as U.S. Treasury Undersecretary David Malpass will meet with his Chinese counter, Wang Shouwen, in Washington on Wednesday. The meeting will be the first between senior officials since June, when U.S. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross met Chinese Vice Premier Liu He ended with an agreement. According to U.S. and Chinese officials, this week's talks will center on a list of more than 140 specific demands, which were originally drafted by the Trump administration for the first round of trade talks in May. This includes the U.S. wanting China to raise the value of its currency. Sources say in a private discussion with U.S. counterparts, Chinese officials have indicated they would be willing to implement or discuss about 2/3 of the demands. However, neither side is optimistic the upcoming meeting can succeed, where 3 earlier rounds have failed. In an interview with Reuters on Monday, President Trump said he had low expectations for the talks, and the U.S. was in no rush to resolve the dispute. Beijing officials have said that Trump's constant provocations have made it extremely difficult for them to offer conciliatory gestures. Despite many American businesses being affected by the recent tit-for-tat measures, observers say Trump believes he can win a trade war with China. This, according to watchers, adds to the chance that President Trump will proceed with his latest threat to hit China with tariffs on another $200 billion worth of goods. Lee-Seung Jae, Arirang News.
Venezuela came to a standstill on Tuesday amid uncertainty over President Nicolas Maduro's introduction of a new currency aimed at revitalizing the country's crumbling economy. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Noah Adam. So Adam, just how bad is it looking for Venezuela?
Well, Mark, the country's economic turmoil seems to have gotten worse in recent days amid hyperinflation and confusion over the new currency. The value of its sovereign bolivar has already lost value against other currencies since it went into circulation on Tuesday. The new bolivar has been devalued by 96%, dropping 5 zeros off the old currency. That means a can of Coke, for example, that used to cost 2.8 million bolivars now costs 28. The streets of major cities remain quiet as the public, as well as many businesses, are unsure of what the new monetary system will involve. Venezuela's opposition also called for a national strike to protest President Maduro's economic recovery package, which he has hailed as a revolutionary formula. A bank holiday was declared Monday to help banks and businesses adapt to the new currency, but confusion still lingers. Such moments in Venezuela can be extremely volatile, but there have been no reports of significant protests or violence yet. However, millions of Venezuelans are fleeing to neighboring countries in fear of an economic collapse. Meanwhile, in other bad news for Venezuela, the country's northern coast has been rocked by a powerful 7.3 magnitude earthquake. It struck late Tuesday afternoon, local time, some 40 kilometers east of the city of Carúpano. The tremor could be felt more than 600 kilometers away in Caracas, where people were evacuated from buildings. A tsunami warning has been issued along the Caribbean coast. As of yet, there are no reports of damage or any casualties. A 95-year-old suspected Nazi war criminal living in the United States has been deported to Germany. Yakif Pali lived in New York City and is accused of lying about his wartime work when he immigrated to the United States. He has denied allegations that he worked at a Nazi camp during the war, saying he only served as a Nazi guard because his family was threatened. He was stripped of his American citizenship in 2003 and his deportation was ordered about a year later, but for more than a decade no country would take him in. Pali is, however, unlikely to be prosecuted in Germany due to a lack of evidence.
Well, thank you very much, Aram, as always. And that's where we're going to leave it for now. We have our next newscast. It's coming up at noon Korea time with our very own Lee Ji-yoon. So until then, goodbye.